This lecture is on Simone de Beauvoir's book, The Second Sex. Beauvoir was born in 1908 and was a lifelong companion of philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. She was born into a Catholic family and was sent to an elite convent school where she had the desire to become a nun. She lost her faith as a teenager and became an atheist. She later dismissed religions as the inventions of men to perpetuate their dominion.
In the text, Beauvoir asks, "What is woman?" She says we no longer believe in eternal essences that define woman. Humanity is male, and man is the one who defines woman. She is not considered an autonomous being. The triumph of patriarchy was not the result of violent revolution, says Beauvoir. From the origins of humanity, their biological privilege enabled men to affirm themselves alone as sovereign subjects. Woman is never the one who chooses her lot. A woman's place in society is merely what men assign her. Women's history has been written by men. Man is truly the absolute type and the essential. Woman is the inessential and merely the other. To be a real woman is for a woman to accept her role as other. For a woman to be successful is incompatible with her role as other. She knows that the duality between the absolute and the other can be found throughout history, including in most primitive societies. No group sets itself up as the one without immediately setting up the other opposite itself. For example, village people view anyone not belonging to the village as suspicious others. Anti-Semites see Jews as others. Rich see the poor as others. White American racists see blacks as others. Men have always been dominant, and in no country is woman's legal status identical to men's. Men have better jobs, higher wages, and greater chances to succeed than their female competitors. Men occupy the most important positions, like places in industry and in politics.
Beauvoir says women have never created anything grand due to lack of opportunity. Notable women have yielded great power. Queens and female saints have yielded tremendous power. Convent life makes women independent of man, and some abbesses have yielded great power. She lists St. Joan of Arc, St. Catherine of Siena, and St. Teresa of Avila. Their actions and writings rise to the heights that few men ever attained. Beauvoir says the success of some few privileged women neither compensate for nor excuse the systematic degrading of women on the collective level. The very fact that these successes are so rare and limited is proof of their unfavorable circumstances that they aren't being given opportunity. Beauvoir says women's concern has been to please. This desire to please interferes with her success as an artist. She is often already afraid of displeasing for writing to begin with and ceases to innovate. The writer who is original is always disturbing, antagonizing, and scandalous. Women are still astonished and flattered to be accepted into the world of thinking and art. Thus, she relies on proven values that conform and do not seek to explore. She will thus excel at producing bestsellers, but will not blaze new trails. Women do not challenge the human condition because they barely have begun to be able to assume it entirely. Some misogynists believe because women are neurotic, they will never create anything of value. Beauvoir responds that psychological imbalance does not mean powerlessness or mediocrity.
Beauvoir investigates why men oppress women. She says one of the benefits that oppression secures for the oppressor is that the humblest among them feels superior. In the US, a poor white from the South can console himself for not being a black person. Likewise, the most mediocre of males believes himself a demigod next to a woman. For those with an inferiority complex, no one is more arrogant, aggressive, or disdainful towards women than someone with worries about their own strength. Those who are not threatened by their fellow men are more likely to recognize women as a counterpart. However, even for them, the perspective of woman as the other remains valuable for all the benefits they receive from it. Many men take delight in feminine misery and are repulsed by the idea of reducing it. Beauvoir investigates why women don't rise up against their oppressors. It is often strength in numbers that confer the privilege of the absolute dominating over the other. The majority imposes its law or persecutes the minority. But women are not a minority like American blacks or Jews. There are as many women as there are men on the earth. Often some historical events subordinated the weaker to the stronger, like with Jews or blacks. The oppressed then share a past, tradition, sometimes a religion, or culture. But with women, there is no one historical event to which women's oppression could be linked to, but has always occurred throughout history. Women lack the concrete means to organize themselves into a unit that could place themselves in opposition to men. They have no history of their own, religion of their own, no common land of their own. They live dispersed among men, tied to their oppressors and family life more closely than to other women. White women are in greater solidarity with white men, not with black women. Rich women are in closer solidarity with rich men than with poor women. The rich woman clings to her chains because she clings to her class privileges. She believes that women's liberation would deprive her of her wealth. Liberated from the male, she would be condemned to work. While she may dislike having her rights to private property being controlled by her husband, she would deplore even more having this property abolished. Unlike any other oppressed group, women wouldn't dare try to exterminate their oppressors.
Women find themselves in a masculine universe where she is to give obedience and respect to the godlike men who set goals and standards. The respect women give to the heroes of the masculine world's laws stem from women's powerlessness and ignorance. This blind faith to the laws of men is passionate, stubborn, unconditional, and stupid. While women rant against men in general to their female friends, they lack the conviction to defy males. They see him as tyrant, egotist, and vain man. But he is also the liberating hero and divinity who sets the standards. It is because women have never experienced liberty that they do not seek out liberation. Thus, it is understandable that she does not take the path of liberty enthusiastically. Refusing to be the other would mean renouncing all the advantages an alliance with a superior group confers upon them. She loses the material benefits that come with her bondage. She now has to deal with the anguish and stress of creating her own goals without man's help. Foregoing liberty and becoming a man's thing is an easier path. Woman often deprives satisfaction from her role as other. Beauvoir notes that patriarchal values are still alive, and there is not yet equality between the two sexes. This inequality prevents women from having a hold on the world. The burdens of marriage are still very much heavier for women than for men. Childcare and housekeeping is still almost exclusively the woman's burden. The woman employee has difficulty reconciling her job with managing the household. Woman's salary is inferior to man's in many fields. She is paid less for the same job. Neither men or women would be interested in working under a woman's orders. Men are the ones who take the highest positions and hold the most important jobs. Social customs impede women from the sexual possibilities on par with men. The unwed mother is an object of scandal. Thus, men's economic privilege, their social value, the prestige of marriage, the usefulness of masculine support all encourage women to want to please men and remain in a state of serfdom. Woman chooses to be as man defines her. While factories, offices, and universities are open to women, marriage is still considered a more honorable career. Everything still encourages the girl to expect fortune and happiness from Prince Charming, instead of attempting the difficult and uncertain conquest alone. Parents still raise their daughters for marriage rather than promoting their personal development. Thus, she is less solidly trained than her brothers and less committed to her profession. Beauvoir says man has been the transcendent, while woman the immanent. Men have been privileged with expressing transcendence through projects. Women have been forced into a repetitive and uncreative life of immanence. Women passively submit to her biological destiny, where there is no motive to claim a higher meaning for her existence. She gives birth and breastfeeds. These are not activities, but natural functions. They do not involve a project. Motherhood leaves woman riveted to the body's natural functions, like an animal. She is condemned to domestic labor. This is where she is locked into repetition and immanence. Day after day, she repeats the same thing, producing nothing new. Man acts in a way that transcends his animal condition. Man has been an inventor since the beginning of time. He produces instruments that expand his grasp of the world. He constructs canoes to conquer the seas and appropriate the world's treasures. Man as a creator forges the future. He builds dams, skyscrapers, an atomic reactor. Man's vocation is action. He needs to produce, fight, create, progress, go beyond himself. Traditional marriage does not invite woman to transcend herself with him. It confines her to immanence. The woman puts her life in her husband's hands, and he is the one who gives her life meaning. She submits to her husband and is rewarded by being protected through male force. Men we call great are those who take the weight of the world on their shoulders. They have either succeeded in recreating it, or they have failed. Either way, they are the ones who have been able to take on this enormous responsibility in the first place. They are those who are considered guilty of the world's faults and responsible for its progress. No woman has ever done this. This is the reason for her mediocrity. Beauvoir says customs and fashions cut woman from transcendence. Customs and fashions have been applied to cut the feminine body from its freedom. The Hollywood star's painted nails deprive her of her hands. High heels, corsets, hoops, farthingales, and crinolines were meant less to emphasize the woman's body curves than to increase the body's powerlessness. A skirt is less convenient than trousers. High-heeled shoes impede walking. The dresses and high heels that are least practical and the most fragile hats are considered the most elegant for women. Paralyzed by uncomfortable clothes, the body appears to man as his thing, prey to male desires. Society has required woman to make herself an erotic object. On the contrary, men's clothes convey his transcendence and do not attract attention. They are comfortable and simple and made to favor action rather than impede it. Lesbians often dress in a masculine way, perhaps by defense mechanism. This is a way of refusing to make themselves merchandise on display. From a young age, almost all girls complain of being bothered by their clothes, of not being free in their movements, of having to watch their skirts or light-colored outfits that get dirty so easily. Life is unhealthily prohibited to them. Beauvoir says girls are taught they are inferior from childhood. The young girl is persuaded that more is demanded of boys because of their superiority. The young boy leaps toward an open future. He can be a sailor or engineer. He can stay in the fields or leave for the city. He will see the world. He will become rich. The girl will be a wife, mother, and grandmother. She will take care of her house exactly as her mother does. She will take care of her children as she was taken care of. Her story is already written in the heavens. With zeal, arrogance, and resentment, women given the care of a little girl are bent on transforming her into women like themselves. Even a generous mother who wants the best for her child will think it wiser to make a true woman out of her so she could best be accepted by society. She is given other little girls as friends. She is entrusted to female teachers. She is taught child care, falls to the mother. She is encouraged to feel delight for child care. She is given dolls so she will already feel the tangible aspects of these riches. She is taught sewing, cooking, housework, how to dress, how to take care of her personal appearance. She is dressed in uncomfortable and fancy clothes she has to take care of. Posture is imposed on her. She is told not to look like a tomboy. Strenuous exercise is banned. She is forbidden to fight. Beauvoir says the girl's normal destiny is marriage. Her youth is consumed by waiting. She is waiting for man. The adolescent boy also dreams of woman, but she will just be one of many different elements in his life. She does not become his sole destiny. The girl awaits the male to be her liberator. Everything encourages her to abandon herself to the arms of men to be transported to a sky of glory. She learns that to be happy, she has to await love. Woman is Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Snow White, the one who receives and endures. In songs and tales, the young man sets off to seek the woman. He fights and combats dragons. She is locked up in a tower, a palace, a garden, a cave, chained to a rock, captive, put to sleep. She is waiting for her prince to come. Subjected to his gentle authority, she will find the same security she had in her father's arms. She has always been convinced of male superiority. Everything convinces the adolescent girl that it is in her interest to be submissive to the man. Female friends envy and admire the one among them who gets the most masculine attention. In American colleges, the female student's status is based on the number of dates she gets. A girl is humiliated if she is not sought after by a man. This humiliation turns to disgust and bitterness. To escape this, she will often marry her first prospect. Girls realize they are not equipped to get along on their own. Not knowing how to work to make a living, they seek a lifeline in marriage. Her decision is usually accompanied by distaste and resignation rather than enthusiasm. If the young man who proposes to her is more or less suitable, she accepts him without loving him. Outside his regular studies, the male student amuses himself by freely exercising his mind, and from there emerge his best discoveries. The woman's daydreams are oriented in a different direction. She will think of her physical appearance, of man, of love. She will give the bare minimum to her studies and career. A woman easily gives up music, studies, or a job as soon as she has found a husband. Despite the benefits of submitting themselves to a man, girls do not accept their destiny without regret. Growing up, she envies boys' power. Sometimes parents and grandparents poorly hide the fact they would have preferred a male offspring. Either this, or they show more affection to the brother than the sister. Boys themselves treat girls with contempt. They play among themselves, and exclude girls from their group. Girls envy boyish activities. They suffer not being able to climb trees, ladders, and roofs. They have a desire to have power over the world, but they are unable. Mothers limit the girl's freedom. They are hostile to their daughter being free and bully her. For the adolescent boy, his effort to become a man is respected. He is already granted much freedom. The girl is required to stay home. She is never encouraged to organize her own fun and pleasure. The girl sees male hierarchy in the family. The girl sees that the father's authority is the sovereign one. The father's life is surrounded with mysterious prestige. The hours he spends in the home, the room where he works, the objects around him, his occupations, his habits have a sacred character. It is he who feeds the family, is the one in charge, and the head. Usually he works outside of the home, and so is the mediation for communication with the rest of the world. He is transcendence. He is God. This is what the child feels in the power of his arms when he lifts her. If the father shows kindness towards his daughter, she feels her existence magnificently justified. She is deified. The girl learns male superiority through her studies. The more the child matures, the more masculine superiority asserts itself. The girl realizes that it is not women, but men who are masters of the world. It is this revelation that significantly alters the way she perceives herself. Everything helps to confirm this hierarchy in the little girl's eyes. Her history and literary works she is raised on are an exaltation of man. Men made Greece, the Roman Empire, France, and all countries. They discovered the earth, invented the tools to develop it, and governed it. Children's literature, mythology, tales, and stories reflect the myths created by men's pride and desires. The little girl discovers the world and reads her destiny through the eyes of men. All important events happen because of men. If the little girl reads the newspapers, she notices that today, as in the past, men lead the world. The heads of state, generals, explorers, musicians, and painters she admires are men. It is men who make her heart beat with enthusiasm. Her femininity leads her to doubt her professional opportunities. The girl is convinced that she has limited capacities. Because parents and teachers accept that the girl's intelligence is lower than the boys', students readily accept it too. Girls' intellectual growth in secondary school is given less importance. As a young girl, she is limited and dominated by a male universe. Wherever she goes, there will be a ceiling over her head and walls that block her path. It is a painful condition to know one is passive and dependent at the age of hope and ambition. Beauvoir talks about how the girl is frightened by puberty. The thought of childbirth is scary to her. Often it seems not extraordinary at all, but rather horrible that a parasitic body should proliferate inside her body. The idea of the monstrous swelling frightens her. How will the baby get out? She dreads the tortures that she cannot even imagine. Images of tearing and hemorrhaging will haunt her. No girl can think of these images without shuddering. If she has ever experienced a violent physical shock, tonsils removed, tooth pulled, she will project the remembered anxiety onto childbirth. The girl is seen as a thing during puberty. On the street, eyes follow her. Her body is subject to comments. She would like to become invisible. She cannot have pride in her body until it has received male approval. What frightens her is the male masculine's verdict of her body. The girl's bodily changes are embarrassing. Menstrual periods inspire horror in adolescent girls because they thrust them into an inferior and damaged category. The feelings of degradation will weigh heavily on the girl. Her bleeding body leads her to lose self-respect as a human being. Young girls are often irregular in their periods. They might be surprised during a walk, in the street, or at a friend's. They risk dirtying the seat or their clothes. Such possibility makes her live in constant anxiety. The girl could be so afraid of her disgrace being known that she gives up going on pleasurable activities. The anguish of being a woman eats away at her. The young man, however, is proud of his sexual inclinations. Sexual desire is aggressive for him. There is an affirmation of his personhood and transcendence in it. He boasts of it to his friends. The sex drive that sends him towards the female is just like the aggressive drive that throws him in to dominate the world, so he recognizes himself in it. The girl can accept her sexual desires, but most often they have a shameful nature. Her whole body is experienced as an embarrassment. The girl goes from one male master to another through marriage. When patriarchy is powerful, men strip a woman of her rights to hold and transmit property. In primitive times, the clan treated her almost like a thing. She is part of payments to which two groups mutually consent. When marriage evolved into a contractual form, for a long period, the contracts were signed between the father-in-law and son-in-law, not between husband and wife. A young girl's free choice was always highly restricted. A woman not marrying made her a parasite and an outcast. Marriage was her only means of survival and the only justification of her existence. She must give children to the community. The woman gives her husband her entire person. She takes his name. She integrates into his class. She follows him where his work calls him. She owes him her virginity and strict fidelity. Even when women are more emancipated, the economic advantages held by men force her to prefer marriage over a career. She will look for a husband whose situation is superior to her own, who will help her get ahead faster and further than she could. Beauvoir sees it as understandable that women are tempted by this easy solution, since women's professions are so unrewarding and badly paid. A woman alone is seen as a socially incomplete being. Even if she earns a living, she needs a ring on her finger to achieve the total dignity of a person. However, for a young man, marriage is not his fundamental project. A man can be a respectable adult while remaining unmarried. With the chains of marriage heavy, a wife has to find a way to come to grips with the situation she cannot escape. Some become tyrannical. Others take on the role of victim. They make themselves their husband and their children's slaves, and find a masochistic joy in it. Others suffer from not being able to do anything and take refuge in dreams. They create problems around them or close themselves up to an imaginary world. Beauvoir says private property leads to women's oppression. When she is a young girl, the father has complete power over her. On her marriage, he transmits it entirely to her spouse. Since she is his property like a slave or a thing, it is natural for a man to have as many wives as he wishes. Only economic reasons put limits on just how many wives a man can have. The husband can disown his wife at whim. In return, woman is subject to rigorous chastity. When a woman becomes a man's property, he wants a virgin. It would be the worst of crimes to risk giving his heritage rights to a foreign offspring. As long as private property lasts, marital infidelity on the part of the woman is considered a crime of high treason. If society denies private property, women's condition improves considerably. Sparta, where community property prevailed, had women treated almost as equal as men. Beauvoir talks about how man dazzles yet frightens the young girl. To reconcile these contradictory feelings, she will idolize distant male movie actors who she will post pictures of over her bed, male heroes who are inaccessible. These make-believe loves confuse her fantasies with reality. Many girls long persist in stubbornly following their dream throughout the real world. They seek a male who seems superior to all others in every way. This exalted chosen male will appear as the absolute and elite being who she wants to give herself to. In the name of these high standards, the girl disdains two ordinary suitors. While idolizing distant men who dazzle her, the young girl fears being the sexual prey of a man. The girl both wishes for and fears the shameful passivity of being consenting prey. She is overwhelmed with confusion at the idea of bearing herself before a man. She is divided between wanting a strong embrace that will turn her into a trembling thing, and not wanting to be wounded by brutality and force. The most obvious and detestable symbol of physical possession is penetration by the male sex organ. The girl hates the idea that this body she identifies with may be perforated as one perforates leather. Woman does not usually have access to the universe of violence, so these wrestling-like embraces terrorize her. Man does not merely seek in the sexual act subjective pleasure. He wants to conquer, take, and possess the woman. He makes her his as he makes the earth his when he is plowing, planting, and sowing. The young girl possesses little of her own except her own body. It is her most precious treasure. The man who enters her takes it from her. She is dominated, subjugated, conquered. The woman is penetrated and impregnated through the vagina. This always constitutes a kind of rape. The painful surprise of the swooning virgin, who thinks she has finally reached the accomplishment of her dreams, feels an unexpected pain. The dream fades away, the excitement disappears, and love takes on the appearance of a surgical operation. If the woman proposes romance too boldly, the man flees because he insists on conquering. The very use man makes of her destroys her most precious qualities. Weighted down by childbirth, she loses her sexual attraction. Man's fantasies are of conquering and freely being loved by a woman. Clearly, man wants woman's enslavement when fantasizing himself as a benefactor, liberator, or redeemer. If Sleeping Beauty is to be awakened, she must be sleeping. To save the princess, she must be captive. The average Western male's ideal is a woman who freely submits to his dominion, who does not accept his ideas without some discussion, but who yields to his reasoning in the end. The true victory for man as liberator or conqueror is that woman freely recognizes him as her destiny. Man has succeeded in enslaving woman, but in doing so, he robs her of what made possessing her desirable. Reduced to a servant's condition, her magic fades, and is no longer the desirable wild prey sex object she once was. Thus, marriage becomes servitude for man as well. After having desired and attained a lovely young girl, the male must now spend his whole life feeding an overweight and dried-out old woman. The delicate jewel intended to embellish his existence has become an extremely unpleasant burden. Beauvoir discusses the inequality in the sex relationship. Patriarchal civilization condemns women to chastity, whereas the right for men to relieve their sexual desires, whether in or outside of marriage, is openly recognized. If a woman is unchaste, she arouses disdain, whereas her male sexual partner, who is unchaste, receives admiration. Nothing forbids the male to be sexual with a woman of a lower class, but the rich woman who gives herself to a man of lower class is socially degraded. Beauvoir points out that to be feminine is to be weak. Any self-assertion will take away from her femininity and her seductiveness. She will gain value in the eyes of males by modeling herself on their dreams. Girls all learn that to please men, they must give in to them. Their mothers urge them not to make advances to them, to assume a passive role. If they want to flirt or initiate a friendship, they should carefully avoid giving the impression that they are taking the initiative. Men don't like tomboys or thinking women. Too much audacity, culture, intelligence, or character frightens them. For men, it is in accomplishing himself as independent that he acquires his social value and manly prestige. To be an autonomous human is to be a man. For the girl, being a free human and a feminine vocation are incompatible. This is why adolescence is such a difficult period for women. She is torn between her desire for freedom and social pressure to be a passive object. Beauvoir talks about homosexual inclinations of adolescent girls. She says the feminine body does not frighten the girl. The excitement one girl arouses in the other is generally without violence. Homosexual embraces do not involve penetration. The girl could be a passive object without feeling deeply alienated. It is in part out of fear of violence and of rape that the adolescent girl often gives her first love to an older girl rather than to a man. All relationships entail conflict, but many of the difficulties that arise between the virgin and her first male love do not exist in the homosexual first love. While women move in a hard and harsh male universe, her hands still long for the embrace of smooth skin and soft flesh. This explains why there subsists in many women, in a more or less hidden form, a tendency towards homosexuality. It can be said that every woman is naturally homosexual. Every adolescent female fears penetration and masculine domination. She feels a certain repulsion for the man's body. On the contrary, the feminine body is for her an object of desire. If the possessive tendency exists in women more strongly, her orientation will plausibly be toward homosexuality. Rebelling against becoming passive flesh or prey, many lesbians engage in masculine protest through disgust for her submissive female peers, disguising her clothes, looks, and language where she forms a couple with a female friend where she assumes the male role. Many women athletes are homosexual. They do not perceive this body that is muscle, movement, extension, and momentum as passive flesh. Most lesbians partially reject men. There is disgust or resentment. There is a masculine inferiority complex. Men are better armed to seduce, possess, and keep their prey. Lesbians detest men's power over women. Lesbians also take exception to men holding social privileges. Lesbians take exception to men being stronger than them. It is a crushing humiliation not to be able to fight with men, knowing that they can knock you out with one blow. Lesbians group together to show that they do not need men either socially or sexually. Beauvoir discusses prostitution. She says the prostitute is a scapegoat. Man unloads his wickedness onto her. She is an outcast. From an economic point of view, her situation is the same as the married woman's. Between those who sell themselves through prostitution and those who sell themselves through marriage, the only difference is the length of the contract. The main difference between marriage and prostitution is that the married woman is respected by society and puts a limit on oppression. The prostitute does not have the rights of a person. She is the sum of all types of feminine slavery at once. Yet, the prostitute succeeds in acquiring a certain independence. Giving herself to many men, she belongs to none definitively. The money she accumulates ensures her economic autonomy. Prostitutes not only earn their living like men, but also live in nearly exclusively masculine company. Yet while no man is the prostitute's definitive master, she still has the most urgent need of man. If the man ceases to desire the prostitute, she loses all her means of existence. The gifts showered on her by her pimp are chains. The prostitute is totally dependent on her body, which time pitilessly degrades. Like the prostitute, Hollywood stars fall into slavery. Their bodies are no longer their own. The producer decides on their hair color, weight, figure, and type. Diets, exercise, fittings, and makeup are daily chores. Going out and flirting are part of personal appearances. Private life is just another moment in their public life. In France, being promoted in the entertainment industry means being sexually involved with your superior. The woman whose occupation it is to entertain is perhaps more of a slave than the prostitute. Beauvoir comments on housewives. She says housewives have in common a fatigue from a never-ending battle that never leads to victory. Similar to the torment of Sisyphus, day after day, one must wash dishes, dust furniture, and mend clothes that will eventually get dirty, dusty, and torn again. As soon as things are used, they are dirtied or destroyed. She never gains the sense she is conquering a positive good by cleaning the house, but a never-ending battle with the evil of uncleanliness. She often submits this task of cleaning the house in rage. As the wife maintains the home, the husband only notices disorder and negligence and takes order and neatness for granted. Preparing meals is more positive work and often more enjoyable than cleaning. It involves going to the market. She can find some relief from the loneliness of the household. The husband attaches more importance to a well-prepared meal than a clean house. The triumphant moment of the cook is when she places a successful dish on the table. She is proud to feel she is the creator of a perfect moment. She is the one bringing the guests together. She is the dispenser of happiness. But the frequency of it quickly changes the joy of cooking into a tired routine. Done every day, the work becomes monotonous and mechanical. It is filled with waiting for the water to boil, waiting for the roast to be cooked just right. There are long periods of passivity and emptiness. Most of the time, cooking is accomplished in boredom. Beauvoir says, the wife lies to herself. The young wife rarely admits her feelings to herself with such sincerity. To love her husband and to be happy is a duty to herself and society. This is what her family expects of her. If her parents were against the marriage, she wants to prove how wrong they were. She persuades herself she feels great love for her husband. This passion takes a more possessive and jealous form the less sexually satisfied she is. Beauvoir talks about the wife and mother as expendable. In the first years of marriage, the wife lulls herself with illusions. She tries to admire her husband unconditionally. She tries to feel she is indispensable to him and her children. But then she sees her husband can get along without her. Her children are made to break away from her. They are always more or less thankless. She finds herself alone and abandoned with nothing to do for herself. Beauvoir says the man enjoys being in charge. In the evening, after a difficult day dealing with his equals and obeying his superiors, he likes to feel absolutely superior and dispense incontestable truths to his wife. Using his wife to shore up his confidence, he tells her about the day's events. He tells her how he wins over his adversaries. To increase his authority, he likes to exaggerate feminine incapacity. All the resentments accumulated in his childhood throughout his life, accumulated daily among other men who were around him, he unloads at home by unleashing his authority over his wife. He acts out violence. He issues orders in a severe tone. He yells and hammers the table. The drama is a daily reality for the wife. Beauvoir says that marriage leads to boredom. Even those marriages that work well, where the spouses compromise and do not antagonize each other, still cannot escape boredom. They have nothing else to share with one another after a few months or years. Marriage dooms the wife to repetition and routine. Real activity, real work, are the privilege of men. Her only occupations are sometimes exhausting, but never fulfill her. Beauvoir advocates open marriage. She says a man can be an excellent husband and still be unfaithful. His extramarital affairs do not prevent him from carrying out a friendly communal life with his wife. It could be the same for the wife. She often wishes to share in her husband's existence, create a home with him for their children, and still experience other embraces. A pact of freedom and sincerity would abolish this defect of marriage. Repressed women make ill-tempered and aggressive wives, sadistic mothers, and fanatical housekeepers. She should not have to repress her desires for other men. A woman often graciously accepts her husband having other women. She is even flattered. Beauvoir promotes divorce. She says the ideal would be that each human being, perfectly self-sufficient, be attached to another by the free consent of their love alone. Beauvoir notes that the husband has more power over his wife through income. Traditional form of marriage is changing, and there is more equality between spouses. As long as the man has economic responsibility for the couple, equality is just an illusion. He determines where they live due to the demands of his job. The standards of living is fixed according to his income. Relations and friendships depend on his profession. Divorce is only an abstract possibility if she does not have the means to earn her own living. There are young women who are trying to be financially independent, but seldom do they persevere in their studies or in their jobs for long. They know their work will most often be sacrificed to their husband's career. Their salary will only help out at home. The birth of a child forces her to confine herself to the role of matron. It is still very difficult to reconcile work and motherhood. Beauvoir discusses pregnancy. She says woman experiences pregnancy as an enrichment and mutilation. The fetus is a parasite exploiting her. She possesses it and is possessed by it. She is proud of it, yet also feels like the plaything of obscure forces. There are women who are very flirtatious and grasp themselves essentially as erotic objects. They suffer from their bodies being deformed and incapable of arousing desire as a pregnant woman. Pregnancy is not enrichment for them, but a diminishing of their self. When women finally give birth, there is a surprising sadness and disappointment in seeing him outside. She does not even recognize him. She is expected to be familiar right away. But she has no common past with this little stranger. She is stupefied by her indifference. The joy he is finally here is mingled with the regret that this is all that he is. There are also many mothers who are terrified of their new responsibilities at the birth of their child. During pregnancy, no initiative was demanded of the mother. Now in front of her is a person who has rights. Some women happily caress their babies while they are still in the hospital, but upon returning home, they start to regard them as burdens. Even nursing brings them no joy. They worry about ruining their breasts. The baby's mouth hurts them. He seems to be sucking her strength, life, and happiness from them. The infant inflicts a harsh servitude on the mother. He is like a tyrant. She feels hostility for this little individual who threatens her flesh, her freedom, her whole self. This is why cold, unsatisfied, melancholic women who expect a child to be a companion or provide warmth and excitement to them are always deeply disappointed. These examples all prove there is no such thing as a maternal instinct. The mother's attitude is defined by her situation and by the way she accepts it. If the circumstances are favorable, the mother will find herself enriched by the child. Like the woman in love, the mother is delighted to feel needed by her child. However, unlike the woman in love, there is no reciprocity. The woman is not before a man, a hero, a demigod. She is before a fragile body. The infant possesses no value, and he can bestow no value. The mother must expect no compensation for her generosity. A great risk for the infant is that the mother he is tied and bound to is almost always an unfulfilled woman. Some ways she is unfulfilled is that she is sexually unsatisfied. She feels socially inferior to man. She has no hold on the world. She tries to compensate for her frustrations through the child. Given how many desires, revolts, and pretensions she secretly harbors, it is frightening that helpless little children are given over to her. Just as when the mother both pampered and tortured her dolls as a girl, This behavior is symbolic for what is a bitter reality for the child. A mother who beats her child does not only beat the child, but, in a way, she is taking her revenge on the world. There are women who love to dominate their child. When the child is tiny, they will treat the baby like a toy or a doll. Later on, they will only want a little slave who will blindly obey them. They will vainly show off the child like a trained pet. Mothers have self-indulgent, violent, and tyrannical tirades against their children, the same way that husbands let themselves go with their wife when they get home from work. This self-indulgence is more dangerous because wives can better defend themselves against their husband than the child can defend himself against his mother. Thus, it will be better for the child if his mother were a complete person, not a mutilated one. It will be better for the child to be left infinitely less to his parents than he is now. It'd be better for the child if his studies and amusements take place with other children under control of adults whose links with him are only impersonal and dispassionate. If the woman's love life has made her hostile to men, she will find satisfaction in dominating her male baby, reduced to his infantile figure. She wants him to be infinite and yet fit in the palm of her hand, dominating the whole world and kneeling before her. She wants him to be soft and sedentary. She forbids sports and friends. She makes him unsure of himself because she wants to have him for herself. But still, she is disappointed if he does not at the same time become an adventurer, a champion, a genius she can be proud of. Women prefer having a boy even if he is more difficult. Because of the prestige women attribute to men and the privileges they hold, many women wish for a son. The son will be a chief, a leader of men, a soldier, a creator. He will impose his will on the face of the earth. His mother will share in his immortality. The houses she did not build, the countries she did not explore, the books she did not read, he will give to her. Through him, she will possess the world, but only by possessing her son. Beauvoir says most women detest their feminine condition. They experience it in resentment. They wish for or accept a daughter with the bitter pleasure of finding another victim. At the same time, they feel guilt at having brought her into the world. At times, the mother will try to impose exactly her own destiny on her daughter. At other times, she fiercely forbids her to resemble her. As her daughter grows up, the mother wants to reduce her daughter's freedom. The mother sees her daughter wishing to go her own way from her as a mark of detestable ingratitude. The pleasure man savors in being absolutely superior to women is a kind of pleasure that women only get to experience toward her children, especially her daughters. The mother feels frustrated if her daughter's independence results in the mother's autonomy being taken away. Her daughter's independence makes her feel abandoned and misunderstood. The mother likes to rule over her feminine universe without competition. The mother wants to be unique, irreplaceable. Yet the mother's young daughter makes it so that she is no longer unique. The mother cannot accept that her daughter can really be a substitute for her. The mother scolds her daughter sternly if, after being away for 2 days, she finds the household in disorder. But she also goes into fits of anger if she so happens that family life continued along well without her. It is even more intolerable that her daughter assert herself. The mother detests the girlfriends her daughter confides in. The mother criticizes them, prevents her daughter from seeing them too often, or even radically forbids her to be with them. All influence that is not of the mother's own is bad. The mother has a particular animosity towards women her own age who her daughter turns her affection to, like teachers or the mothers of her friends. The mother envies all the amusements that wrench her daughter away from the boredom of the household. The older the mother gets, the more this bitterness eats away at the mother's heart. Beauvoir says motherhood can only bring joy to the woman capable of disinterestedly wanting the happiness of another without any reward for herself. Beauvoir cites Helene Deutsch, who believes women can successfully accomplish motherhood under the condition that it is freely assumed and sincerely desired. Deutsch says the woman must be in a psychological, moral, and material situation that allows her to bear this responsibility. If not, the consequences can be disastrous. In particular, it is criminal to advise having a child as a remedy for sadness or stress. It causes unhappiness for mother and child. Only a balanced, healthy woman, conscious of her responsibilities, is capable of being a good mother. Sex with one's husband, homemaking, and motherhood are parts of the whole of a woman's calling. But the different functions conflict with one another. It is very difficult to remain sexually desirable with chapped hands from cleaning and a body deformed from pregnancies. A woman in love often feels resentment towards the children, who ruin her seduction and deprive her of her husband's caresses. If she is deeply maternal, she will be jealous of the man who also claims the children as his. The perfect homemaker sees the children as the enemy of waxed floors. Maternal love is often lost in the reprimand and outbursts that underlie the concern for a well-kept home. It is unsurprising that the woman torn between these contradictory responsibilities often spends her day in a state of nervousness and bitterness. Feminine friendships she is able to make or keep are precious for a woman. They are very different from the ones men have. When they meet, they find the strength to shake off their chains. They negate male sexual dominion by confiding their male sexual failures and clumsiness. They contest the moral and intellectual superiority of their husbands and men in general. What makes these relationships valuable is their truthfulness. When confronting man, woman is always on stage. She lies when pretending to accept herself as the inessential other. With other women, she can relax and be herself. While women feel more solidarity with one another than men do, the element of hostility comes into play. The element of competition comes into play. A housewife has a more intimate relationship with her maid than a man does with his chauffeur. But the housewife and the maid also have hostile rivalries between them. The maid frees the housewife from actual work, but the housewife still wants to assume the responsibility and credit for the work. The housewife wants to think of herself as irreplaceable. If the maid does her job too well, the housewife cannot pride herself in being unique. She harasses the maid in order to find fault with her. Women are abruptly stripped of their femininity at menopause. Still young, she loses her sexual attraction and fertility. Through the eyes of society and her own eyes, sexual attraction and fertility offer a woman the justification for her existence and her chances of happiness. With her future taken from her, she still has half her life to live. Women are haunted at the thought of aging. The mature man is engaged in more important enterprises than those of love. The alterations of his face and body does not destroy his possibilities of being physically attractive. The woman has counted on her sexual attributes far more than man has. She has counted on her sexual attributes to keep her husband, to be assured of his protection, and to succeed in most jobs she holds. What will become of her when she no longer has a hold on her husband through her appearance? Her man's mediation has been the only way that she can have any hold on the world. The woman wonders this as she powerlessly witnesses the degradation of her body. She fights it, but dyes, peeling, and plastic can never do more than prolong her dying youth. Anxiety grips the middle-aged woman whose life is already finished, even though death is not imminent. Instead of fighting against despair, she often chooses to intoxicate herself with despair. She rehashes grievances and regrets. She becomes morbidly jealous of her husband. She is jealous of his friends, sisters, and job. She accuses some rival of being responsible for all her problems. Her children are old enough to not need her. Relieved of her duties, she finally discovers her freedom. However, once she finally has attained freedom, there is nothing more for her to do. At 50, she is in full possession of her strength. She feels rich in experience. This is the age when men rise to the highest positions. But as for her, she is forced into retirement. There is no one who requires her devotion anymore. Between 40 and 50, when the mother sees her little ones become adults, it is at that instant they are escaping her that she passionately attempts to live through them. Her attitude is different depending on if she wants to be saved through a son or a daughter. She usually puts her strongest hope in her son. Here she hopes her son finally comes to her as an adult to be her liberator, to give her the treasures her husband was never able to satisfy her with. He will defend her against her husband's supremacy. She puts herself in her son's hands with as much fervor as a lover. In exchange for this gift, she counts on being raised to the right hand of this God, her son. The mother believes she has acquired holy rights by the simple fact of giving birth to him. But the mother remains unsatisfied, even if she admires her son with incredible pride. She still wants to feel indispensable to her God. The daughter-in-law will strip the mother of her functions. She feels hostility towards this stranger who takes her son from her. Her son owes his mother his life. What does her son owe this stranger he just met? The mother will impatiently wait for the daughter-in-law to be revealed as an impostor. She spies on her daughter-in-law, criticizes her. In her grown daughter, the mother will find a double. The mother who passionately identifies with her daughter is just as tyrannical as she would be with a son. The mother wants to relive her youth through her. She will choose a son-in-law who conforms to the perfect husband she never had. She will easily imagine somewhere in her heart that it is she he is marrying. Through her daughter, she will satisfy her old desires for wealth, success, and glory. It is rare for a girl to put up with this kind of guardianship from her mother indefinitely. The girl rebels from her mother. Then the mother who began cherishing her son-in-law will become hostile to him. It takes a mother a rare mixture of generosity and detachment to find enrichment in her children's lives without becoming a tyrant or being tortured by their accomplishments. The grandmother's feelings toward her grandchildren are an extension of those she has for her daughter. She often transfers her hostility onto them. It is not only out of fear of public opinion that so many women force their seduced daughter to have an abortion, to abandon the child, or to do away with it. They are only too happy to keep her from motherhood because they wish to keep the privilege for themselves. The grandmother who identifies with her daughter often welcomes the grandchildren more avidly than her daughter does. The grandmother goes back 20 years in time, and she becomes the woman giving birth again. All the joys of possession and domination of her children from long ago are returning. All the desires of motherhood she had renounced with menopause are miraculously fulfilled. Unfortunately for her, the grandmother is only authorized to play the role of assistant. She feels dethroned. She is also naturally jealous of her son-in-law's mother because she must share the grandchild with her. The older woman realizes she is useless. The children are raised and the husband has become successful, so she must find out how to kill time. She is likely to find relief in social life. She attaches enormous importance to her parties. She goes to every wedding and funeral. She becomes a gossip. She compensates for her inaction by dispensing criticism and advice to those around her, even to those who do not seek it. There are those older women who are involved in charity organizations. They elect a board, discuss its statutes, dispute among themselves, and struggle to keep their prestige over rival associations. No one must steal their poor, their sick, their wounded, their orphans. They would rather leave them to die than yield them to their neighbors. They bless the wars and famines that transform themselves into benefactors of humanity. If it is suggested to the older woman she must begin to move towards the future, she responds sadly, "It's too late." She lacks the drive, confidence, hope, and anger that would allow her to discover new goals in her life. She takes refuge in the routine that has always been her lot. She makes repetition her system. She throws herself into household obsessions. She becomes more deeply religious, rigidly stoic, indifferent, egotistical. Beauvoir says the old woman will find serenity towards the end of her life. She will find peace when death's approach frees her from anxiety about the future. With her husband often older than her, she will watch his decline in revenge. When her husband loses his public functions, he becomes useless, while his wife at least continues to run the home. Proud of her independence, the elderly woman towards the end of her life will finally begin to view the world through her own eyes. Those who have women's confidence, like doctors, priests, and social workers, know that complaint is the commonest mode of expression for women. Women friends groan together about their ills and men in general. Women's furious despair rejects all solutions, for no solution is acceptable. She wants to live her situation exactly as she lives it, in impotent anger. Since childhood, she has protested against her condition. It is because her life takes place against a background of groundless revolt that she cries so easily. She was promised compensation if she abandoned herself in the hands of a man that would be returned to her 100-fold. She considers herself duped. Her husband is the perfect victim to rise up against concretely, because he embodies the masculine universe. It is through him the male society took the woman in hand and duped her. He bears the weight of the world. If things go wrong, it is his fault. When he comes home in the evening, she complains to him about everything. She wants him to feel guilty. Ironically, the hostility she feels for her husband binds her to him instead of moving her away from him. She wants the man she hates nearby to make him pay. Her supreme consolation is to set herself up as martyr. While more or less acknowledging men's supremacy and accepting their authority, she will contest their reign tooth and nail. She lies to keep her man and ensure her daily bread. Women will be intentionally late to spite their man. Women will cheat on their man not for pleasure, but for the sake of revenge. Beauvoir talks about women's attempt to convert their prison into heaven. There are women who attempt to attain salvation on their own. They try to achieve transcendence while in an imminent state. Beauvoir says that we see it in the narcissist, the woman in love, and the mystic. Commentating on how women become narcissistic, Beauvoir says it is because a woman is forbidden activities that involve strength and energy, and because she is reduced to nothing, that she fiercely limits her interests to herself alone. She gives herself extreme importance because no important object is accessible to her. The narcissistic woman will be incapable of love. The woman who is truly in love forgets herself, but the narcissistic woman cannot forget herself. Society life is important to narcissistic women. They need gazes to contemplate them, ears to listen to them. They need the widest possible audience. And nothing will give the narcissist deeper satisfaction than devoting herself publicly to the theater. Beauvoir discusses the relationship between narcissistic women and erotomania. Erotomania involves the delusional belief that someone is in love with them despite contrary evidence. It is significant that 9 out of 10 patients with illusions of being loved are women. They are clearly seeking in their imaginary lover the culmination of their narcissism. They want their man to be endowed with the supreme qualities, and that their ideal love sees her with irresistible virtues and superior to all other women. This narcissistic drama plays itself out at the expense of real life. The narcissist loses all hold on the concrete world and doesn't care about establishing any real relationship with others. She refuses to accept she can be seen other than as she shows herself. She no longer listens, but only talks. Her vanity is never satisfied. The older she grows, the more anxiously she seeks praise and success. The next category of women who attempt to convert their prison into heaven is the woman in love. The word love has not the same meaning for both sexes. Love is merely one occupation among many in the life of the man, while it is life itself for the woman. Men in love do not abandon themselves completely. The woman they love is merely one value among others. In contrast, the woman in love completely offers herself for the benefit of her master. The woman dreams of being infused with the superior male being. She wants to melt into him, forget herself in his arms. She exalts him. She exalts him as a supreme reality, as a god. Love becomes a religion for her. She wants to abandon herself to a man in order to save herself. To achieve this union with man, she wants to feel necessary by responding to her lover's demands. The more demands the man makes, the more fulfilled the woman feels. She tries to be everything for him. As long as she is necessary for her beloved, she feels completely justified. She savors peace and happiness. She feels exalted at the right hand of a god. But no man is truly God, so this extreme happiness does not last. She creates a hell for herself. She becomes tortured by incredible jealousy. Everything he does that does not involve her, she sees as an abandonment of her. She demands that he see her as necessary for him, the same way she sees him as necessary for herself. But this is no man's desire. So she suffers or lies to herself. It is not up to the man to justify the existence of the woman who worships him. Placing absolute value on the loved one results in a heartbreaking disappointment for the woman to discover her idol's weaknesses and mediocrity. She forbids him to show weakness. For a fallen god is not a man, but an impostor. When the idol is no longer worshipped, he has to be trampled upon. The third route that women go down to try to convert their prison into heaven is the route of piety. Beauvoir says, love has been assigned to woman as her supreme vocation. When she addresses it to a man, she is seeking God in him. If circumstances deny her human love, she will choose to worship God himself. The flirt, the lover, and the indulgent woman become religious around menopause. Women find a solid recourse against men through God. Male's pride becomes a sin. The passivity to which woman is doomed is seen as holy. Reciting her rosary by the fire, she knows she is closer to heaven than her husband who is out at political meetings. Young girls and adolescent women throw themselves into religious devotion with an infinitely greater fervor than their brothers. God's gaze that transcends all humility humiliates the boy's arrogance. However, Beauvoir does not see this as a legitimate life path due to her atheism. To overcome the patriarchy, Beauvoir describes her notion of the independent woman. The way for women to escape slavery, says Beauvoir, is through positive action into human society. Work alone can guarantee her concrete freedom and transcendence. Beauvoir lists obstacles to women's independence. She mentions the obstacle of men wanting to love a slave and not a peer, the obstacle of a husband asking his wife to give up her career. If she refuses, she is condemned to being alone. The obstacle of a man expecting her to run the house and oversee the care and raising of children. She does not want her husband to be deprived of marrying a real woman. She wants to be elegant, a good housekeeper, and devoted mother as wives traditionally are. Taught to respect male authority, she may still believe that man takes first place. Beauvoir says during her studies and in the early decisive years of her career, it is rare for the woman to be able to make full use of her possibilities. She will likely be hindered by her friends and family because they will not support her career efforts as they respect a man's. Her female friends who are married are a temptation for the woman, who strives to ensure her success alone. It seems to her that by advancing further in her career, she will either displease men in general or humiliate her husband or lover by being too dazzling a success. Because of an inferiority complex from upbringing, the woman easily settles for a mediocre success. She often considers the very fact of earning her own living a great enough feat. In trying to go further, the woman is afraid of failing miserably. She is bothered that no one has confidence in her.